What's up, everybody? Benji Bruce here, Speaking Lifestyle. We're going to get going for today. Today is going to be very simple. We're going to talk about how do you get the high-paying gigs, the $20,000 gigs and up. How do you get those types of gigs? So that's what I want to talk about today. Let's see who's hopping on real quick. And then any questions you guys have, make sure you ask them as I'm talking. And then I'll go back and I'll just see who asks questions. And then I'll make sure to answer the questions as well. So once again, today we're going to talk about how do you get the high-paying gigs? I mean, what do you do to get the high-paying gigs? It's easy to get a free gig, but how do you get the high-paying gig just in general? What's up, Maggie? What's up, Ari? And it's funny because Maggie, actually, this is the reason why I wanted to talk about this today, because I was actually looking at the post in terms of how you posted the $25,000 gig. So I was thinking, oh, all right, let me talk about how to get the high-paying gigs, right? This is one of the things that I thought for the longest time. Like when I was just building and just trying to get gigs in general, it got to a point where it was really easy to get the gig. Then it was just a matter of how do I get high paying gigs? So it was a matter of how do I increase the price? And at a certain point, you'll realize that you kind of get stuck. Like you're sitting there, you're actually trying to do things and you're getting gigs, but then you'll kind of get stuck at a certain fee level. So whether it's $5,000 to $7,500 or $7,500 to $10,000, it's like you'll get stuck at a certain fee level. So how do you kind of get past this getting stuck phase, or how do you just not get into it to begin with? And so that's what we're going to talk about today. What's up, Glenn, Paul? What's up, everybody? Alex, John, what's up? What's crack-a-lackin'? Dave, Davlin. All right. So getting high-paying gigs, it's not really all that hard. It's just different, to be honest. And so you got to understand that in the beginning, it's about your speech. And then eventually it becomes about you. And what I mean by that is that when people are paying you, they're really paying for your speech. They're paying the $5,000, $7,500, $10,000 for your speech, for your presentation. So you're selling the presentation. Eventually, in order to get the higher paying gigs, it has to become about you. They don't just want a speaker or an entertainer. They want you. And that's how you really get the high paying gigs. And that's what you have to pay attention to. I'm going to show you guys some little tactics that I learned in terms of getting the high paying gigs. That's what I want to go over today. All right. So let's see. Once again, if you guys have any questions as I'm talking, just make sure you ask them, and then we'll go back. Today's not going to be a long day in terms of how this works. Like I said, getting high-paying gigs, it's not really all that hard. It's just a matter of understanding that at a certain point, I believe it's about maybe $25,000. That's when it really becomes more about you and not really the presentation. It's one of the reasons why the guys like Gary Vaynerchuk, Grant Cardone, Tony Robbins, Les Brown, all these guys can charge damn near six figures, because it's not about how good their speech is. It's about them coming to the event. And so it's one of the reasons why I changed up my strategy, because my strategy was just, all right, get gigs. And it got to a point where it was really easy to fill up the schedule. Then it was just a matter of how do I charge more? How do I get 25,000, 30,000, hey, 50,000, 100,000? How do I get these? And so my strategy switched to building the brand in general. And so that's essentially what I'm doing now. But in order to actually get to that point, you have to learn how to actually get the gigs to begin with. So let's actually get into the whole thing. First things first, you want to save money in your bank. Okay, so whenever you're actually getting booked, whenever you're doing anything, or even if you're just working a job, you need to save money in the bank, because this is going to allow you, this is the foundation for actually charging high-paying or getting high-paying gigs. Because in order to get high-paying gigs, you have to be willing to lose every other gig. In order to get a $20,000 gig, you have to be willing to lose a $5,000 gig. You have to be willing to lose it. Like, not just, oh, here, I'm going to quote this 20 grand. And then if they say we only have 5 grand, you're like, okay, fine, I'll do it. No, you literally have to be ready to lose a $5,000 gig. And so if you save money in your bank, you're not desperate for it. And it comes across in your communication. And so this is why I keep telling people you have to learn how to save money in your bank. That way you're just not desperate for the gig in general. And I'm telling you, like, this is probably one of the biggest things for me when I was actually trying to get high paying gigs, in terms of why I was able to increase my price so fast in general, because I went from just doing entertainment. I went from charging $200 for a show to then doing, I said, I did 525. It wasn't just 500. I read some book where it said like the mental strategy behind prices. If you say not just 500, but if you say like 525, then people think there's a reason for the $25 extra. So I said, okay, 525. So I went from 200 to 525. I said, you know what? Let me do, I think it was like 850 at the time. Then I increased to 850. And I said, okay, forget it. Let me do 1500. Then I went to 2500, then 5000, then like 7,500, then 10,000, and 15,000, 20,000, 25,000, 30,000, right? And so that was kind of literally the pricing increase that happened with me. And I could have just skipped most of it. I could have went from 200 to instantly 5,000. I could have just skipped most of it, to be honest. The only reason I didn't is because of all the bad advice I was out there in terms of you can only increase your price once the demand, once you get too many people coming to you and everyone's requesting to hire you, then you can start increasing your price. That's the dumbest advice that I've ever gotten that literally just made everything go slow. And so in order to increase your price, you just got to understand that you have to come from a position of power, and you can just skip. Like no matter what it is you're charging right now, you can charge 5,000, you can skip to 20,000. You can just skip everything in between. It's just a matter if you do it the right way. When I was doing an event out in Finland, one of the first things the guy said when I got there is, so they contacted me about 10 months in advance, and they were paying $20,000 to bring me out there and everything, right? So when I go out there, one of the first things he says, he's like, "Oh, to be honest, I didn't think we'd be able to afford you, and I didn't even think that you'd be, or I didn't think we'd be able to book you. I thought you'd already be booked." And at the time, once again, they were paying $20,000, and then of course they were booking me like 10 months in advance. And I was thinking, like, damn, like I came across with that much value in terms. They thought I was going to charge more than like 20 grand. They thought I was going to be booked even like more than a year in advance. I'm thinking like, oh, dang, all right, so what I'm doing is working, right? So that's the impression that you have to give off if you want to actually start charging a lot more money for what it is you're doing. All right, and so you start with that, but you start with the money in the bank, and then you go to the market itself. So most speakers are in a market where you simply cannot get $25,000 gigs, $20,000 gigs. You simply can't get it. You're in the wrong market. If you are in the youth market, if you're a youth speaker, you will have a really, really hard time getting $20,000, $25,000, $30,000 gigs because they just can't afford to pay it. If you are talking to high schools can't afford to pay every speaker 20 grand. They can pay maybe Tony Robbins when he comes in. They're like, Tony, man, I know you normally charge $1 million, but come on, man, we got $20,000 at most, right? They can afford to pay someone like that every now and again, but they can't afford to pay most speakers $20,000. And so if you're in the wrong market, nothing you do will save you. Like absolutely nothing you do can allow you to charge X amount for high paying gigs. So the way you know you're in a good market for high paying gigs is basically if you're in the corporate market, you're in the right market. But what you want to do is you want to sit there and you want to look at the entire market in general and ask yourself, do a lot of speakers get paid $20,000 or $25,000 or $30,000? Do a lot of speakers, unknown speakers, do they get paid $20,000? That's what you need to be asking yourself. If a lot of unknown speakers aren't getting paid that much, then you're in the wrong market to begin with. And so that's the first thing you have to pay attention to. You can't just look at a market and say, okay, yeah. I mean, so-and-so got Mel Robbins got $25,000 for this gig. Well, that's because Mel Robbins built a huge damn freaking motivational brand. Of course, she can charge $25,000. I don't know how much she charges, but of course she can charge a lot of money for an actual presentation, no matter where she is, no matter what market she's in. And so you have to look at markets in terms of, do other speakers who are really unknown, do they get $20,000, $25,000 gigs? If the answer is no, then you're in the wrong market and you got to switch markets. There's nothing you can do about that. If you are in a market where people can't afford to pay, switch markets fast. Instantly. Like that's the only thing you can do at that point. So you got to ask yourself, are you in the right market? And then you simply got to ask yourself, are you actually selling what they're paying for? This is one of the reasons why you never see too many breakout women speakers, right? Because if you look at 99% of female speakers, you'll see that most of them do female empowerment, right? They're selling something people aren't paying for. People do pay for female empowerment speakers to an extent. They don't pay $20,000, $25,000, $30,000 for a female empowerment speaker. That's just not how it works, right? And so I don't even know. I think Forbes Riley is the only other female speaker that I've talked with who truly understood that. She was like, when we were having a conversation, she was like, man, if I see one more female speaker that tells me they're doing female empowerment, I'm going to slap them, right? It was actually pretty funny. And so I thought I was the only one who believed this until I started talking with her. And Forbes Riley, she has a huge brand, by the way. Huge brand. You can just Google her. But basically, you got to ask yourself, are you selling what people are paying for? If you are a female speaker and you are selling female empowerment, you will not get high-paying gigs. You just won't. You'll be able to get on a stage, of course, but you won't get high-paying gigs because the people who put on those conferences, they put on those events, they just don't have the money to pay $20,000, $25,000 for every speaker. It's a speaker who's not unknown. If you're Sheryl Sandberg, if you're Mel Robbins, yes, you're getting paid six figures. But every other speaker isn't getting paid. So remember, you got to ask yourself, are unknown speakers getting this fee? If they're not, you're in the wrong market. And then are you selling what they're paying for? It doesn't matter what you think your topic is, what you want your topic to be, what type of expert you are. It doesn't matter. The only thing that matters is what do they pay $20,000, $25,000, $30,000 for? What do they pay for? That's what you need to be very aware of. It's one of the reasons why if you don't consider yourself to be a motivational speaker, you're going to have a hard time getting high-paying gigs because people pay motivational speakers $20,000, $25,000, $30,000 for speeches. If you're selling your expertise as the keyboard expert, the Apple keyboard expert, you're going to have a hard time getting those gigs, the high-paying gigs, because that's not what people pay for. So you have to truly understand this. The reason why I switched from a mentalist to a motivational speaker is simply because I understood that as a mentalist, very few mentalists get paid $20,000 and up for a presentation, unless you're very well known, right? So once again, unless you're very well known, that's the exception. And I'm thinking in terms of, all right, how many people who aren't well known are getting paid $20,000, $25,000 for a gig? It was damn near none, right? So I asked myself, I said, okay, well, if you look at speakers, though, there are plenty of unknown speakers who are getting $20,000, $25,000 for a gig. So what if I just call myself a speaker? And so that's literally what I did. I literally just went on my website. You just see me doing all these mind reading demonstrations and the videos, everything. I literally just changed the wording from mentalist to motivational speaker. I just went, all right, you know what? I'm going to be a motivational speaker. Bam, there we go. And instantly my price just increased instantly. And so that it was because I simply looked at what are people actually paying for in terms of the speech. And so that's literally how it started. Now, at this point, so you get the foundation right. You get the foundation in terms of you have money in the bank, so you're not desperate for a gig. You understand the market. You understand that you're in the right market, and you also understand there are plenty of other speakers who are getting paid the $20,000, $25,000 gig. You understand that at that point, right? Now it's a matter of, do you look like you're worth paying this $20,000 for? Or more importantly, do you look like you get $20,000 gigs all the time? So that's why I keep telling people, like, you got to focus on the website. You keep improving the website. You got to sound in demand. A speaker who actually is getting $20,000, $25,000 for a gig, they really sound in demand, like in terms of their email conversations, everything they do, it sounds in demand. And here's where you have to look at the context around you, okay? This is where you're looking at the context. And so I described this to entertainers a long time ago. I said, imagine this. Imagine there's two entertainers. There's a restaurant magician, and then there's a magician who got hired to perform in the White House, to the White House dinner and do walk around, right? Both of these magicians are doing walk around magic. This magician's walking around table to table, performing for people. Then this magician over here, he's walking around to people in the White House dinner, performing for people. Which one has more value? The one in the White House has more value. He's the one that seems to be charging more, even though he may not be better. He may not actually charge more. His schedule may not be filled up. Nothing. He seems to be the one who has the more value just because of the context around him, just because of the fact that he is performing in the White House. That is why you need to pay attention to context in general. So what you're doing is you're looking at what are the assumptions people are making. And this is why I keep saying the whole thing with the website, because you can influence people's assumptions. You can influence people's perceptions based on the information you give them through your website. And so you got to look at what's around you, what's surrounding you. And so just understand the context in general in terms of actually getting high paying gigs. This is why you need to focus mostly on building social proof, especially in the beginning, right? If you're literally starting, your mindset isn't how do I get paid? It's how do I get so much social proof that it looks like I've been getting paid $50,000 for several years, right? That's what your mindset is in the beginning. You don't care if you get paid. You don't care if you have to pay to speak on a stage. Like, I don't care. In the beginning, all you're doing is focusing on social proof. You're like, I need to look like someone who actually charges $25,000. That's what you're doing in the beginning. And then you get to a certain point where you do look like it, and then bam, you actually start charging it, right? That's what you're doing. And then here is where the rubber meets the road, right? This is where you really start paying attention to small details in terms of getting the gig. So let's say you're doing the prospecting part. The way you get a $25,000 gig is the exact same way you get a $2,000 gig in terms of the prospecting. All you're doing is, for those of you inside the Speak Pro Academy, you're going through the event finder system. You're just implementing that system. It's the same prospecting thing. The difference are small details like, how did they hear about you? Okay. So if you know that people heard about you by you going to them, that means you have less value. If they come to you, you have more value. Now, it doesn't mean that if you go to them, you'll never get a $25,000 gig. That's not true. But all it means is that when you go to them, they know nothing about you, like literally nothing. You can be a billionaire, right? You can be a billionaire. There can be an entrepreneur conference saying, hey, we're looking for people who have built real businesses, right? You can be a billionaire and you can reach out to them and say like, hey, I'd love to speak at your conference. They know nothing about you. So at that point, they just associate this billionaire with some random scrub at this point, right? And so when the billionaire goes to them, there's no value in there. There's no context around this billionaire. And so, bam, he just gets dismissed the same way everybody else does. And so that's why you want to think in terms of, did you go to them or did they come to you? And for those of you in the Speak Pro Academy, you guys got to really go through the referral system, because if you build out the referral system the way I told you inside the Speak Pro Academy, that's when you really start to get the high paying gigs. You go from doing the outreach, getting the regular gigs of $5,000, $10,000, $15,000 gigs, getting those, and then you implement the referral system to get those $25,000 gigs, right? That's literally what I did, because I noticed that when people would come to me, I could be less lenient on negotiating, right? So if I said the price is $25,000 for a 60-minute presentation, and they said, oh, that's way more than our budget. If I were to say, okay, yeah, I understand, thank you. If I were to say something like that, like literally leave no room for negotiation whatsoever, they would still come back and say, well, I mean, if we can get the $25,000, like maybe we can get it, but we can't pay for flight and hotel. Like, would you be willing to do that if we just give you $25,000 and we don't pay for flight and hotel? I'm like, okay, yeah, that's fine, right? And I notice I can do that when people come to me, not when I go to them. So if I go to them and then I do the exact same thing, the context is very different. So the context is, no, I went to them, the lower value, and then bam, I'm like, oh, no, you know what? Sorry, can't do anything less than 25 grand. And so that's why you're paying attention to things like the context. Did you go to them or did they go to you? And it's basically in terms of how invested are they? And so this is why I keep mentioning the systems like your CRM, then Yesware and all that sort of stuff, why you got to pay attention to that, because you have to look to see how invested are they. So when you reach out to them, it's not that you can't get a $25,000 gig by reaching out to them. I've done it several times, right? And so the difference is how invested are they? So if I see all they did was open the email and that's it, there's no way in hell I'm gonna get a $25,000 gig. If I just see they open the email, they clicked on a link to the website, and that's it, it's going to be hard once again. If I notice they clicked on a link and they've watched several videos, well, at that point, I'm like, all right, cool. They watched the videos. And so I'm looking to see how invested are they. Is their response a one-word response, right? So it's like dating, right? If you're dating, you're texting, a guy's texting a girl, and then all of a sudden the girl replies with one-word responses like, oh, yes, no, ha, 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 and stuff like that. She's not interested in you. And so at that point, as a guy, you just stop. You're like, all right, forget it, delete. And so that's what you're doing with events as well, to where if you notice that their responses are very quick, like you're sitting there responding with a freaking 3-paragraph response, and they respond with one sentence, and you got to think like, okay, they're not that invested in me. It's either that or they're the CEO of the company. If it's the CEO, there's an exception, right? If the higher value someone is, the more direct they are, which means that they're not going to spend time writing 2 paragraphs for you. They just won't. So they will actually reply with one sentence, even though they may be interested, right? So one of the reasons why with the one company where I was talking with the VP, even though I was sending him a lot of emails and stuff, and I was like following up all the time, and he would reply with like 1-2 words or one sentence, like no more than one sentence, is one of the reasons why I kept talking to him, just because I knew he was high up. I knew he was the VP. Well, at the time, he was like one below the VP. Now he is the VP. But I knew where his value was in the food chain, right? And so I understood that he was actually just busy. But understand, you got to think in terms of like, are they just doing one-word replies, one-sentence replies? If they're doing that, they're not really invested in any way. And so that's the first thing that I pay attention to in terms of, do they come to me or do I go to them? And then in terms of the questions, the reason why I ask the certain questions that I ask in terms of like, who did you hire in the past and things like that, the reason why I ask that is because it gives me an idea of what I can actually charge them. And so I ask like, how big is the event? Who did they hire in the past? And I look to see how far in advance did they contact me, right? So, or let me go back a little bit. So if I know that they hired Les Brown last year, I know they can afford $25,000, right? And if anything, if I were to actually say $25,000, let's say they hired Les Brown and I say $25,000, they may pass on me because Les Brown, I think he charges maybe like 80 grand or something like that. So it's such a huge difference. They're thinking, oh, this guy's not on the same caliber as Les because he charges way less, right? So if I know they hired someone like Les, I'm going to say something like $60,000, right? That's literally what I'm going to do. And so on the other hand, if they say we hired John Doe, I'm going to look up this speaker. I'm going to look for him, and I'm going to type in so-and-so speaker bureau, so I'm going to look him up. And I'm just going to go through and just kind of see like, oh, maybe what does this speaker charge? And sometimes I've even called them. Like I've done this several times with entertainers as well. I literally just send them a message. Hey, man, I got this event. I was wondering, what did you charge these guys last year, right? I literally do that. And so that's one of the things in terms of paying attention to who they hired before. And I'm looking at how big the event, because the bigger the event, the bigger their budget. But more importantly, one of the things I look at is how far in advance did they contact me? This is a huge, huge indicator in terms of how much value they place on you and how much you can actually charge in general. So if they contact you and it's 2 months in advance, you probably will not get a $25,000 gig, because someone who's charging that much is an in-demand presenter. That's why they can charge that much. And if they contact you only 2 months in advance, they're thinking you're not that in demand. That's why they only gave you 2 months in advance, right? On the other hand, let's say Tony Robbins. There's no way in hell you would contact Tony Robbins 2 months in advance. You would even question whether or not you can bring him in by contacting him a year in advance. You'd literally go on right now. You'd be like, all right, man, we're coming at the end of 2018, coming on 2019. Shoot, I wonder if we can actually get Tony Robbins for next year's Christmas event, 2019 December event. I don't know, man. I mean, the dude's probably busy, right? So you're thinking with someone like him, you're like, oh, shoot, I don't even know if we can get him a year in advance. And so that's one of the reasons why you pay attention to how far in advance they contacted you. All right. And so, and then once again, like, did you go to them or did they go to you? And then also, did they see you live? So if they actually saw you live, your value increases like ridiculously. I mean, it's crazy in terms of how much value increases when they see you live. Even if they see the same video, the same reactions, everything on video on your website, hey, it's great. You have good value. But if they see you live and they feel the experience, they're like, oh, snaps, this dude, my goodness, right? And so those are the things that I'm really paying attention to. And then obviously, how many events are you actually contacting? The reason why a lot of people aren't getting gigs or getting high paying gigs is because you're just not contacting enough. And so you got to think in terms of you're going to get quality through quantity. I can't remember. I don't remember if it was Alio or someone else in the Speak Pro Academy where he said, like, you have some of the best video testimonials I've seen as a speaker. And the only reason is because it was through quantity. Right? I got quality through quantity. So after every presentation, I just had my phone and I just recorded a ton of freaking testimonials. I'm just holding up there and it was like, let's say 50 a night minimum, right? I'm just getting a ton of testimonials and then one or two of them are good out of all that. On the other hand, if I just would have went up to one or two people like, hey, can you say something? Hey, can you say something? Then I never would have gotten like really, really great video testimonials. And so you got to think in terms of the same with getting the high paying gigs. The only way you're going to get them is to increase the amount of people that you're talking to. And you pay attention to small details like, did you go to them? Do they go to you? Who do they hire in the past? And then how far in advance do they contact you? Or how far in advance are they talking to you? So let's say they didn't go to you. Let's say you go to them, right? Well, how far in advance are you guys talking when it comes to the event? So if the event is only 2 months away, once again, it's the same thing in terms of the amount of value you have, because they don't think that you're booked up enough to, like, you're just not booked up enough. That's why they're talking to you in terms of just 2 months in advance. And so that is probably one of the biggest indicators, actually. In order to get the high paying gigs, it's more about what surrounds you rather than anything you're actually doing differently. So like Dave, right? So Dave Davlin, you mastered the Event Finder system. In terms of actually increasing your price, all you're going to do is you're thinking about ways to improve the website. You're always thinking about ways to improve the website, but all you're doing is the same process in terms of contacting the events. That's what you're doing, but at the same time, you got money in the bank, so you don't need any one event to actually say yes or no. And then you're thinking in terms of small details like who did they hire in the past. You're thinking in terms of like how far in advance is the actual event in terms of when you're talking to them. Is it 3 months? Is it a year in advance? The further out in advance it is, the more you'll be able to charge, the more you'll be able to get in general. And finally, you got to actually ask for it, right? A lot of speakers don't get paid high paying gigs because they just don't ask for it. And this is why I keep saying you want to save the money in your bank, because when you save the money in your bank, you're not afraid to ask for a $20,000, $25,000 gig and lose it, because you understand like, hey, you've got nothing to lose. Worst come to worst, you still got money. You can pay rent and bills and all that sort of stuff. You still got money in your bank. Whereas if it actually works, then bam, you get a $25,000 gig. And so as people are talking to you, as you're actually having an email conversation, phone conversation, you pay attention to the small details in terms of, did they go to you? Did you go to them? Do they actually see you live? Who do they hire in the past? How big is the event? You're paying attention to small details. It's the context that matters in terms of getting the high paying gigs. And also, once again, make sure you're in the right market to begin with, because otherwise everything I just said is going to be useless if you're not in the right market. So let's go back. Let's see if there are any questions. Let's see. So, Nick said, is addiction counseling and mental health a good market? It's not a good market for getting paid gigs. It's a good market if you're selling like an online program, but it's not a good market for getting paid gigs. So once again, think about it like this. If you're in a market in terms of getting paid gigs, you got to ask yourself, can you list 10, I just put up 5. Can you list 10 speakers that are actually getting paid $25,000 and up, that aren't well known? If you can't, you're in a horrible, horrible market. You can go online and type in motivational speakers, and there's millions of motivational speakers charging $20,000, $25,000 for gigs who aren't known. And so that's why you always want to come back to, are speakers getting paid this much who aren't well known in the industry, right? And I just want to stress this, by the way. In terms of getting the high-paying gigs, a lot of people think maybe there's something you got to do differently from getting a $2,000 gig than getting a $20,000, $25,000 gig. It's not. The process is the same in terms of contacting the event. It's the event finder process. It's the process inside Speak Pro Academy. It's literally that process, right? It's the same process. The difference are the small details, the context around you. And just little small details. That's really the difference in terms of getting those high-paying gigs. So you said, how do we find out other speakers are getting per speech? So once again, to find out, you can call them. You can just ask them. I did that several times. For some reason, a lot of speakers are afraid to do that. So you just call them and ask them. And then, by the way, whatever another speaker tells you, don't believe it 100%, right? So whenever you ask anyone how much money they make, don't believe what they tell you. Whether it's me, anyone, just don't believe it. Because when people tell you, especially speakers or especially solopreneurs, when they tell you, it's more of their egos getting in the way. They don't want to feel like they're a scrub, so they're just going to say like, "Oh yeah, $25,000, right?" So that's what's going to happen, and so you want to take it with a grain of salt. But it's going to give you an idea of probably what they probably did charge, because very rarely will they lie if you ask them, "What did you charge this event?" Last year or whatever, or 2 years ago, like what'd you charge them? They may not tell you the exact amount, but it'll be in the right range, right? So just keep that in mind. All right. And so there's that. And then obviously if you look up the Speaker Bureau stuff, if you see them on a Speaker Bureau, you'll get an idea. Once again, the Speaker Bureau, it just gives you an idea. So like if you look me up and I'm on a couple Speaker Bureau websites, but I think they still have the price at like $7,500 or something like that. And so basically their price is outdated for me. And so, but it will give you an idea though. So like if you were to Google me, let's say they said, "Oh, we hired Benji Bruce a year ago." Of course, it's going to be way more than the 7,500, but at least you can at least get 7,500, right? So that's kind of what you're doing. So let's see. Felicia said, what's your advice for women speakers? So my advice for women speakers is to stop acting like you're just a female speaker. You got to act like you're a speaker. Just say you're a speaker. You absolutely will not break through into a high-paying market by saying you're a female empowerment speaker, because companies have men and women in the company. So someone who's hiring a speaker for their annual event, they will not look at a speaker and say, "Oh, this is a female empowerment speaker. Yeah, let's bring her into Google." No, that's just not going to happen. Even if it's a female who's in charge of hiring the speakers, they will not do that, because they understand, oh man, we've got plenty of men at this event as well, and men and women. And so you got to stop saying female empowerment. It's like basically female speakers are preaching to the choir. It's like the same thing with the Me Too movement, all that stuff, preaching to the choir. Women are talking to women. What they should be doing is talking to men. Like it should be a dialogue. It shouldn't be a one-way conversation. What I see in the industry is that they're sitting there like, "Oh yeah, we need to really do more," and all this stuff. And they're not talking to the people who can actually help them in any way. It's one of the reasons why I liked what Trump said when he was actually like becoming president. He was like, "Look, man, I'm going to open up dialogue with North Korea. Like, we can't just sit here and just go back and forth with North Korea. I'm going to actually talk to the guy." And so that's what he did. He talked to the guy. And a lot of female empowerment speakers and the Me Too movement, all that stuff, they're just not talking to the other side. They're just preaching to the choir. And that's why they'll keep having the same problem over and over and over. It won't change. And so all you do as a female speaker is you just ignore whether or not you're a female speaker. You just say, "I'm a motivational speaker." Like, that's all you do, right? And so let's see. All right, so we got that. Let's see. Felicia said, how would you guide a female speaker based on markets on how to break into other areas outside female empowerment? Because I don't see a lot of women on stages that are not specifically women. All right, yeah. So like once again, it really just comes down to just stop saying you're a female empowerment speaker. You just say you're a motivational speaker. Like literally, the reason why there aren't a lot of female speakers is because go online. I guarantee, go online, look up female speakers. 90% of them do that female empowerment stuff. 90%, it's ridiculous. That is why there aren't female speakers. Look at Susie Orman. Look at Mel Robbins. They don't advertise female empowerment. Will they speak at a female empowerment event? Yes, of course. But do they position themselves as a female empowerment speaker? Hell no. They understand that by doing that, you literally destroyed half the market, if not more. Actually, no, you destroyed more than half the market, because once again, even another female cannot hire you for a company event. They can't. And so that's why you don't see too many female speakers, because they keep doing that. It would literally be like me saying, all right, I'm black and I'm Jewish. I'm a black Jewish speaker, right? I'm a Jew black. The Jew black empowerment guy. Man, we had slavery and the Holocaust. I mean, you know what? I got to start talking about this stuff. The black Jew speaker. At that point, I just obliterated most of my market. Actually, no, Jews own everything, so I probably just increased my market, to be honest. But no, that's the basics, though. In terms of you just can't do that. You simply say, what do people pay for? That's what I offer, right? Let's see. She said, Felicia Jones, talk about things high-paid speaker. All right. So let's see. What other questions. Sorry, topics, interests, religion that appeals to a large number. All right, so let's see. Mel Robbins, Bandy Hickson. I haven't heard of her, but I'll look her up. See, just go to the speaker bureau, check motivational speakers. All right, so we got that. You guys are having a dialogue. Let me look for the questions. So let's see. You said, so would you not go with what you're an expert on, but conform to the masses, conform to what the masses want? No, it's a matter of, in terms of, all right, so you're an expert. Basically, you're combining the two, right? So you can't really talk about marketing if you don't know marketing. But what you don't do is you don't say, I'm a female empowerment marketer, right? You don't do that, because you just niche your market to a horrible market. The way you sell anything is you look at what do people buy and you sell that thing. This is one of the reasons why so many experts struggle, because experts do it the wrong way. Experts say, here's what I'm an expert in. I'm going to sell that thing. That's the wrong way to do it. You simply say, what do people actually want? That's what I'm going to sell. If I'm an expert in that thing, great. If not, so what? And so you'll see, there's a guy who sells, he sells like female skincare and all this stuff, right? And he sells all that. He's not an expert. He doesn't put on makeup. He doesn't do all that stuff, but he sells it because that's what people buy. And so that's how real entrepreneurs are. Inside the expert industry, there's a lot of wannabes, right? There's a lot of wannabe advice. The advice of a real entrepreneur is very simple. You figure out, what do people buy? That's what I sell. That's all it comes down to. It's not about what do I want to sell? What am I an expert in? It's not about that. It's about what do people buy? And that's what you sell. And so you want to match the two up. If you can match them up, great. If you can't match them up, still, it doesn't really matter. It's just a matter of you sell what people actually want to buy. So it's, that's what it really comes down to in general. All right, so let's see. Paul said, you don't get this insight from anyone. Benji really over-delivers, looking for a best interest. Yep, exactly. Yep. All right. So, let's see. Nick said, all right, not what I meant. All right. Just having a conversation there. So, let's see. Betsy said, what about fee integrity? People finding out what you charge, different fees. I don't know where this actually came from, of people finding out what you charge. I have never had any Fortune 500 client call another Fortune 500 client just to say, hey, Benji charged us 25 grand. Did he charge you guys something similar, or was it like 5 grand? Like, I mean, can you tell me, like, what did he charge you? I've never had that happen. I don't know any speaker, any top speaker who's ever had that happen. People understand, and by the way, even if somehow it does happen, people understand that you increase your prices, right? This fee integrity thing, I don't know. Once again, this is one of the reasons why I don't pay attention to any speakers. Like all the advice from speakers inside these associations and everything, everyone talking about fee integrity and all this stuff. I'm like, look, man, you charge as much as you want to charge. It's like, the way I see it is, I see my presentation as being worth way more than what I'm charging for it. And so if I charge $10,000 for one person and $100,000 for them, oh well, right? I think my presentation is worth that, right? And so the fee integrity, I don't know what that's really about. It just comes down to, what do you want to charge? Just ask for it, right? And once again, this is one of the what if questions that I think people tend to ask that doesn't actually reflect reality. Reality does not operate like that in terms of you charge an event one fee and then they somehow find the contact information to the event that you charged before, and they somehow find that person, and then all of a sudden they're like, what did he charge you? What? He charged you only $5,000. He's charging us $25,000. Oh, that's ridiculous. Oh, that's ridiculous. I've never seen that ever happen. People are too busy to do that, right? It's like, think about it with the VP of Aflac, right? They paid me plenty of money, and I mean, I charged them a lot. If he would have called somebody else, he doesn't have time to call somebody else. That's the thing. He's like, he doesn't have time to just call somebody else just to see what I charge somebody else. They just don't have time for that. And so it's one of the reasons why I ignore all the advice from these so-called speakers in associations, because they keep saying things that don't reflect reality. That's just not reality. It doesn't happen that way. All right. So let's see. You said, thanks for the conversation. All right. So you said it's very interesting when you only focus on highly paid female speakers. They are big time storytellers. If you look at highly paid female speakers, you'll see that all the highly paid female speakers don't actually say their female empowerment stuff. They will do stuff for events like Sheryl Sandberg, right? She does stuff. Well, she's not a speaker. She works at Facebook, but still she speaks. She doesn't actually say like she's female empowerment and all that. She's like, I work at Facebook, right? And same with Mel Robbins. Mel Robbins, I don't know what Mel Robbins is about. What is Mel Robbins? Yeah, I don't know what she sells, but Mel Robbins, speaker, 5-second rule. That's what she was responsible for, right? So it was like, so her thing, it literally just says the power of you. So that's literally all she is. I'm looking at her site, 10 ways to change. Yep, nothing about female empowerment. Literally nothing. Because she understands that, hey, it's just she's selling what people want to buy, just motivation, right? So there's nothing about female empowerment. So let's see. Gigi said, how long is a sales cycle if a speaker niche is corporate consulting? I've heard it's a year long. The sales cycle in terms of anything, there is no answer to that. It's almost like asking how long does it take to build a business, because some people can build it really quick. Some people can build it in 10 years or maybe never, right? So the same goes with the sales cycle. If they come to you, a sales cycle is going to be instant. It's like, bam, got it, right? And so if you go to them, it can take a year or longer. So that's one of the reasons why I keep telling everybody in terms of the prospecting, where you just want to increase those numbers in terms of how many you contact, because there is the lag time between the time you contact them and the time you get booked, which is usually at least a year. And so it's one of the reasons why a lot of people think it's not working too, because they're contacting them for 2 months, nothing's really happened. You're like, man, what the heck? And so they don't realize that, if they keep doing it, then after a year, their schedule is just going to fill up. Like before they know it, people are going to contact them like, hey man, you sent us an email a while ago, and that's what's going to happen. That's just naturally what happens. And so in terms of the actual sales cycle, one of the things that I tell people is just ignore that. Ignore the sales cycle, because you can't control it. You don't want to pay attention to things you can't control. And so you ignore how long it takes. You just ignore the amount of effort you put in. And so you're paying attention to how much prospecting you're doing, the outreach and all that. You're paying attention to that. You're not paying attention to how long it takes, because if you pay attention to the prospecting, it's inevitable that it's going to happen, right? And that's what you're really paying attention to. All right, so let's see. Carlos said, I'm a female speaker as an expert in an all-male industry. There aren't any women in my field, literally none, but there isn't anyone talking about what I'm an expert in. How do you create a market? So I'm assuming you're thinking more like the blue ocean strategy. So creating a market, you got to understand that in the speaker market, it is a stagnant market, okay? You can't create any market in the speaker market. You just can't. Instead, you create a style. You create your own style. Tony Robbins did not create a market. He created his own style. Who else? Gary Vaynerchuk did not create a market. He created his own style. Grant Cardone didn't create a market. He created a style. You have to create a style that allows you to stand out, because the marijuana market is a new market. It's freaking skyrocketing, right? Any of you guys who want to stop speaking, enter a new market, go enter the marijuana market. You'll be a millionaire in like a year, right? And so if the marijuana market is a new market, that's what's going to go up. The speaking market is a stagnant market. It's always been the same. It will always be the same no matter what. Of course, there are going to be little things, little changes, like maybe in the future it's going to be all VR or something, and you'll be able to do a presentation from your house, and then it's going to like be the like you're just going to appear on the stage. It's going to be like virtual reality or something like that. Things like that's going to change, but the speaking market is a stagnant market. It doesn't change. What changes in terms of creating a market is creating a style. That's what you have to focus on, is your style, right? And so, like I said, there isn't a single speaker out there who's created a market. Like, you literally can't name one, because you don't create a market in speaking. You simply create a style. All right, so let's see. Maggie said, just landed another $15,000 gig. Yeah, Maggie's crushing it. Nice. We negotiated with the price of my books, which they wanted to include each participant. I told them I sold for $15, but they only cost that amount. All right, cool. And yes, they came to me. They referred to a gig that paid me $1,000. Yeah, exactly. See? So like Maggie got someone who came to her, and the gig was only $1,000, right? So here's where, once again, the fee integrity stuff comes into play, right? So here's what probably happened with that gig. What happened with that gig is they talked to the person who paid Maggie $1,000, and they probably asked, "What did you pay Maggie?" And they probably said, "Well, don't tell anybody we paid her $1,000." I'm sure they told the other people what they paid her. And then they contacted Maggie, right? Then Maggie said it's going to be $15,000, or however the negotiation thing went, right? She said $15,000. In their mind, they were probably thinking like, damn, it's way more than $1,000. What the hell? That's probably what happened in the beginning. But they also thought about, oh, well, we heard she was good, her website's great, all that sort of stuff. So they just said, okay, fine, right? That's literally what happened. It's one of the reasons why the whole fee integrity thing is just BS. When I hear the speakers in the association say that, I'm like, that's just absolute BS. It doesn't matter if they know what you charge in terms of $1,000 before or any of that stuff. Your price just changes, right? And so they came to Maggie, which is why she easily got that gig, because they came to her. And so that is one of the biggest indicators in terms of, do they come to you, and then also paying attention to how far in advance they came to you. If you look at the context, that's what's going to allow you to really charge $20,000, $25,000. And so that's why, like, when I contact events and I'm talking with events, I'm always looking at the context. That gives me an idea of how much I can actually charge to get paid for events, right? Yeah, Maggie's just crushing it. She got $25,000 gig not too long ago, $15,000 gig now. You guys got to start crushing it. Like Maggie, man, you guys got to start just getting out there. Once again, I mean, if you guys aren't in the Speak Pro Academy, what you doing? What you doing? It's like if Maggie would have thought in terms of, oh my goodness, I paid $2,000 and I got to pay $2,000 for this program. That's a lot of money. She wouldn't have got $25,000 gig, $15,000 gig, all the other gigs she got beforehand. She wouldn't have gotten that, right? And so you guys got to make sure you have a process down to actually do it. Because like I said, getting a $25,000 gig, it's the same thing in terms of getting a $2,000 gig and getting a $25,000 gig. Same thing. The only difference is literally small details in terms of the context. That's the only difference. All right. So let's see. Chris said you loved that last comment. Not sure what the last comment was, but I loved it too. It was probably badass, whatever I said. All right, so let's see. All right, best advice ever, being a women speaker. Cool. All right, Marquita said, I'm black and Jewish. The hilarious part. All right, cool. All right, let me see any other quick questions. See, do you teach people how to sell from a stage or only how to book speaking gigs? I'm really interested in improving the first one mentioned. Now, I don't teach people how to sell from a stage. There is a program inside the Speak Pro that actually goes over what the top closers do, because I studied these guys. I mean, I studied the best. Like, I was like, damn, this dude freaking made damn near $1 million in 60 minutes. What? So I studied the best, right? And I was writing down these notes. I was writing down the notes for myself. I never intended to sell or to sell it, to give it to anybody. I never intended to do that. And then I got asked that a lot in terms of, do I show people that? I figured, you know what? Let me just upload my notes and all that. So that's what I did there. But I don't actually teach that. All right. All right. So let's see. And he said, when I quoted my price, they decided to go with someone else. I know they couldn't afford me. Therefore, their pricing is not my category. Move on. Yep, exactly. So let's see. Corporate said, where's a question? Nope, no question there. Let's see, Carla. Cool. Any other questions? Yes, I'm already labeled as a corporate speaker. All right. So I guess we are good to go. No other final questions. All right. So once again, getting the high paying gigs, you just need to do a few things a little bit differently. But basically what you're doing right now, if you guys are Speak Pro members, you're already doing it. It's just a matter of doing things a little bit differently and also understanding that, hey, it's eventually going to happen. So one of the things that I did in the beginning is I would always like switch, right? I would always say 2,500, and then the next person who contacted me, I'd say 25,000. And so that's what I would do all the time, right? That was one of the ways that I increased my price like instantly. And it was also because I wasn't afraid to lose a gig because I had money saved in the bank. And I was very aware about who I was quoting $25,000 to or $20,000 to. I was looking at, did I go to them or did they only respond with a one sentence response to my emails and all that sort of stuff? If they didn't show that much interest, I wouldn't try to really quote that much, right? So I was paying attention to the context. That's what you have to do. So you guys got to contact a lot more people so you get really, really good at that. You get really good at sounding in demand. You get really good at understanding the context and really good at just paying attention to people's budget, right? And so it's like inside the group earlier today, I mentioned to Elio, I said an easy way that you can tell if another speaker is contacting you and just like bullshitting you, just trying to figure out what your prices are, and that other speakers will essentially contact you and say like, hey, we're interested in hiring Benji for an event. The event is August 3rd, 2019. I was wondering, what do you charge, right? One of the easy ways to kind of figure out if this is another speaker is just to see what email address are they sending it from. If you see that it's sent from an @Gmail or @Yahoo or @Hotmail or something like that, you know that it's probably just a regular person trying to figure out what you charge and stuff like that. So little details like that are what you pay attention to in terms of actually getting high paying gigs. You're paying attention to the small details, the context surrounding what's going on, and then the process. It's the exact same. You're contacting the people. You're building up your personal brand, your website. You're always thinking about how do I improve the website? How do I improve the website? How do I improve the website? You're always thinking about how do I make myself look like I'm worth $25,000? And poof, before you know it, you'll get one. All right, let's see if there was any final questions. All right, did you keep hearing that? I keep hearing that women, especially black women, are not on more stages. Yep. But it is hard to not instantly label yourself that way since most do that. Yeah, and it's funny because what happens is, so like you, Felicia, or just female speakers, what happens is a female speaker will see that. You'll see, oh, why aren't there a lot of female speakers on stages? Or why aren't there a lot of female, just women in tech or something like that? They'll see that, right? So women will see that. Then what happens is women go, oh, you know what? I need to get more women interested in this. I need to get more women interested in technology. I need to get more women interested in female empowerment and all that. And so now they start talking about it. And then they don't realize that is the very thing that's the very reason why there aren't female speakers. Because female speakers see that there aren't female speakers. Then they're like, well, let me help other female speakers. Let me do the female empowerment. And poof, they have now contributed to a lack of female speakers. That's literally the reason why. And so it's absolutely, to me, it's absolutely crazy. And very few female speakers ever listen to me on that, probably because I'm a guy. They're like, what does he know? Right? And so I'm like, fine. All right. Good for you. All right. So let's see. Then focus on creating the right style you have. All right. So we are good to go for today. All right, so we will talk tomorrow, 9 a.m. Pacific time. So once again, Monday through Friday, 9 a.m. Pacific time. We won't be doing a Facebook Live on the 24th and 25th. I'll give you guys some time off for Christmas. For all you non-Jews out there, if you guys want to celebrate your little thing, your whatever you guys call it, Christmas, that little thing, if you want to celebrate that, go ahead, 9 a.m. Pacific time, Monday through Friday. So we will be doing another one tomorrow, 9 a.m. Pacific time. Thanks, everybody, for showing up. Take care, everybody.